Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marilyn Carroll, the president of the League of Women Voters of Ridgefield. I'd like to welcome you all to our first ever virtual candidates forum and thank our partner, the Ridgefield Library, for hosting this event and providing the technical support that I know we really are going to need. I'd also like to thank Gannon Ward, raise your hand, Gannon, if you would, the chair of the League's voter service team, for organizing the forum and for being the official online timekeeper for this event. Last but certainly not least, thank you to the candidates for agreeing to participate in this virtual forum experiment. The League and the library were delighted to see the response we have gotten for this forum and the number of people who have registered for it, which is over 200. As a result, there were more than 50 questions submitted for the candidates covering over 16 different topics. Our moderator will ask as many questions as she can during the time allotted. If your question or an issue that you are interested in was not addressed, we encourage you to contact the candidates' campaigns and ask them directly. For those of you unfamiliar with the League of Women Voters, we are a nonpartisan political organization who encourages an informed and active participation in government through education and advocacy. And like the library, we do not support or oppose any political party or candidates. In addition to this afternoon's forum, the League of Women Voters of Connecticut, along with the Ridgefield League and several other Fairfield County leagues, will be co-sponsoring a live-streamed 4th Congressional District debate on October 18th at 4 p.m. through the Westport Library with Jim Hines and Jonathan Riddle. You can sign up for the virtual event by going to the Westport Library's website. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our debate moderator, Mrs. Jean Rabineau. Mrs. Rabineau is the Chief Administrative Officer for the League of Women Voters of Connecticut and League of Voters of Connecticut Education Fund, and is a member of the steering committee of the League of Women Voters of the Bridgeport area. Mrs. Rabineau has served as an election moderator in Trumbull for more than 14 years and is an attorney in private practice in Trumbull. She is a highly experienced, knowledgeable, and sought-after moderator, and we are very fortunate indeed to have her with us today. And now it is truly my pleasure to welcome Attorney Rabineau, who will introduce the candidates and explain the forum ground rules.
All right, thank you very much, Marilyn. The rules for this debate are fairly straightforward and fairly simple. We have candidates from the 111th and 138th State House districts and from the 26th State Senate district. Candidates will be asked questions district by district. All candidates will get a chance to answer each question. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer. Any candidate may choose to rebut after all of the answers have been given, but each candidate will only have 2 rebuttals throughout the entire afternoon. Once he or she has used them up, that will be it. It will be straight answers only. At the close of the afternoon, each candidate will be given an opportunity for a 2-minute closing statement. The League puts no limits on what the candidates say. However, if a candidate exceeds his or her speaking time, they will get a warning, and if worst comes to worst, we can mute them. That having been said, I would like to go immediately to the first question. Oh, and I should add that the questions that we're going to ask today, some were written by the League of Women Voters, but more of the questions were those that were submitted by those who registered for this forum. So thank you all very much, those of you who have registered. First question will start with the 111th district. It goes to Mr. Hebert first. What do you think the voters are looking for in an elected official? Please tell us about the specific qualifications that you have that make you that person.
Thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this, and to all the participants. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. What are the voters looking for? I think the voters, in particular in this environment, are looking to work with people that will actually have sensible conversations with them and to solve problems. And that's my background. I am a problem solver. Believe me, I'm a father and a husband, and a father of 3 children. 2 girls and a son. And of course, with the girls and my wife, you have to be you have to get along with them and figure out, problem solving and solutions. But I am a 40-year resident of Ridgefield. I've served the town of Ridgefield on a number of boards, including as chairman for 5 years of the Ridgefield Housing Authority. I'm currently a member of the Board of Selectmen. I'm a member of CERT. I've also, over the years that I've been in Ridgefield, I've been a hockey coach, a baseball coach, a softball coach, and professionally, I've spent 10 years on Wall Street. And when I left Wall Street, I became an entrepreneur where I started the Bank of New Canaan, and I currently own and manage a private equity fund. I bring the, so I got to stop?
I'm afraid that was time.
Okay.
All right. Same question to Ms. Berger-Travallo.
First of all, thank you all very much, especially to Gannon for helping us, because I know some of us struggled to get onto this forum. So thank you for making this happen. I believe that voters are looking for someone who is accessible, someone who has a history of bringing people together, someone who is taking this very seriously, but truly understands that not everybody comes from the same point of view to begin with. I have a background in being active in local politics, not only electing local officials and helping candidates to achieve their goal of hitting the seat that they're aiming for, but also in guiding residents to Hartford and their representatives and being a link to those who are meant to represent them. But in addition to that, I also have experience running multi-million-dollar businesses, not something that everybody really talks about when they talk about my background. And in that role, I was able to keep these organizations profit-driven, but also ensuring that employees continue to benefit. I also have worked in the public school district right here in Ridgefield, and I have built relationships with teachers, administrators, and families. The theme has always been building relationships, and I believe that that is something that I can effectively do and will do in Hartford.
Okay, thank you. Same question to Mr. Gucker in the 138th.
Well, thank you to the League for hosting this today. I mean, last time I came to the League event 2 years ago, it was raining like cats and dogs, and today we have the polar opposite, to where it's sunny and beautiful, but sadly we're sequestered inside. What's important and why do we do this? It's all about talking to our constituents and talking to our neighbors and our friends and bringing their voices to Hartford. But it's more about listening than it is talking. It's more about making sure that they're heard, making sure that they have a part to play in all this. And we haven't had that for a long time. You know, I've had people reach out to me over and over and over, you know, with this COVID situation. And our work did not stop at a normal time. I mean, Hartford got shut down in March, but I'm sure Mr. Haskell and myself can also say the same thing. We're doing nothing but helping constituents navigate through the unemployment issues that are going, navigate through personal finance problems, and navigating through life. And that's why we feel we should go back. That's what we do. We work for the people. We're their voice in their absence. And I look forward to continuing to be in their voice. And that's why I'm still here.
Thank you. To the 26th, Mr. Haskell.
Yes, thanks so much to the League for putting this together. I'm really grateful to be participating and honored to be joining each of these folks on the ballot this year. For those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet in person, my name is Will Haskell. I have the honor of representing the 26th District in the State Senate. 2 years ago, I decided to do something pretty unusual. I decided to come home and to run for office. And so many in this community took a chance on me. In living rooms and on front doorsteps, we shared our frustration, not just about the state of our state, but also about the state of our politics. Look, we have to be honest about the fact that there's an elephant in the room. We're not the only people on the ballot, those who are on this forum. And you're probably going to hear tonight something to the effect of what happens in Washington is separate from what happens in Hartford. My experience over the last 2 years has been, tells me that nothing could be further from the truth. When Donald Trump tried to defund Planned Parenthood, Connecticut stepped up to make sure that reproductive health care is considered health care. When Betsy DeVos made it harder for students to afford a degree, Connecticut stepped up to pass tax credits, making it more affordable for the next generation to stay here. And while Washington talked about the problem of paid family leave, Connecticut actually passed one of the strongest paid family and medical leave policies in the country. We set a national model. Now we're doing that again with this COVID-19 pandemic. In the midst of a global pandemic that's also become an economic crisis, Connecticut has prioritized science. We've taken bold, sometimes even unpopular steps to keep this community safe. But what I hear again and again from this community is I'm so proud to live in Connecticut. So thanks for the opportunity to join you today.
Ms. Healy. Kim Healy? I believe you're muted.
Apologies, sorry. So yes, I'm Kim Healy. I'm a wife and a mother of 4. I am a CPA. I'm a former auditor with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I've been a lifelong volunteer in my community, serving as currently the treasurer of the Wilton Library and as a volunteer tax preparer, serving the low income and retired folks here in our state. And now I'm running to be your next state senator. For years, I've been concerned about Connecticut's future, particularly due to the enormous financial challenges facing our state. COVID-19 has only heightened these challenges, and I believe that we need comprehensive change and new representation in Hartford, and that's why I decided to run. I want to advocate for things for our community that we actually want and need. I love Connecticut. I actually chose to move here 26 years ago when I first got married. I've raised my family here, and I want them to be able to stay here when eventually they enter the job market. And I worry that they won't have enough opportunities to do so when their time comes. I believe the challenges that prevent our state from growing began in Hartford, and Hartford is what needs to be fixed. I'm focused on what happens here in Connecticut only. I don't believe that Washington has anything to do with what's going on here, and that I can really make a huge difference. I decided to run when I realized that people like me, just normal people, don't stand up to make our state better. And if that doesn't happen, then we're going to continue down this troubling road. I look forward to meeting everyone. I've already done that. Oh, am I out?
I'm afraid time is up.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. All right. All right. I take it there's no rebuttal on that. We then go to the next question. And again, I'm going to start with the 111th district, but this time Ms. Berger-Javala will get the first chance to answer. This question is about changes in voting. Do you support amending the Connecticut Constitution to make no excuse, high convenience mail-in absentee balloting permanent after this election, or to establish some other method of early voting, not just in-person voting on election day? If so, why? If not, why not? And as I say, Ms. Berger-Javala gets this one first.
This is a pretty simple one for me to answer, and it's probably going to be my shortest answer. I will support any legislation that secures voting rights. There is, over and over, we see that there's absolutely no evidence of voter fraud. These are fallacies that are spread to try and frighten us from doing things outside of what we have always done, which is show up at the polls. No excuse, absentee voting, absolutely. Early voting, let's do that too. We need to make sure that more voices are heard and not fewer. And that's my simple answer.
Mr. Heber?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know whether there's evidence to support voter fraud or not. I don't have any details to back that up, but yeah, I would support voting laws that ensure that every individual legally has the right to vote. And we should make it as easy as we possibly can for them, give them every opportunity and not suppress any votes, but it does need to be done in an open, transparent, and legal way. Thank you.
Okay. To the 138th, Mr. Gucker.
I have to do the unmute thing. I keep forgetting. Yes, the simple answer is yes. I would support all those initiatives. In fact, when we went in special session last week, we went over helping it so that counting of absentee ballots could be done more efficiently through our town clerks. As somebody who has participated in counting absentee ballots in the past, I have never, ever seen any signs of voter fraud. The more that we can make voting accessible to people, the better we are, the better we're represented, and the more people have a voice. So the short answer with the long response was yes.
All right, to the 26th, Ms. Healy.
I will keep it short, and I will just say, yes, I do believe that we should amend the Constitution to allow for no excuse voting.
And Mr. Haskell.
Yeah, thank you so much. The league has been such a champion on this issue, of course, in a nonpartisan way. In my mind, it's not just about no excuse voting. It's also about early voting. The right to vote is rendered absolutely meaningless without the opportunity to vote. 40 states across the country, red states, blue states, Texas, and West Virginia offer many days of early voting. And yet Connecticut is one of only 10 states in the country that offers that one Tuesday in November. God forbid you're a single working parent or a commuter or a student or somebody with a disability. We make it too hard to vote in this state. In the 2016 election, 27 million people participated sometime before Election Day. None of them lived in Connecticut because of our antiquated voting laws. So absolutely, early voting is something that we need in this state, but I'd like to go one step further. I also think that we need to make sure you can request an absentee ballot online. That's something that so many other states have, and I've been hearing from a lot of constituents who do not want to choose between their health and their right to participate this year. They were grateful to be mailed an absentee ballot application with prepaid postage, but let's not forget that that was a Band-Aid solution, something we fought for. I actually led the debate in the Senate on this, something we fought for in Hartford for the 2020 election, but it's not going to be there in 2022. And we need to make it easier for people to participate. We need to make democracy a little bit more convenient. Thanks so much for that question.
Okay, is there any rebuttal on that question? All right, the next question, we will start with Mr. Gucker in the 138th, and it's about housing. How should the legislature address the lack of affordable housing in many municipalities, including Ridgefield, that's the result of exclusionary zoning and land use policies? And the follow-up on that is, do you favor the continuation of 830G, or would you modify it, and if so, how?
So I'm glad you asked this question, and land use has been one of the things that I have fought for here in Danbury. And anytime a municipality gets below 10% affordable housing, according to developers, the town is required to then fill in those voids. The problem that I have with that is it still favors the developer. Developer come in and say you are below the 10% threshold, but then only 10% of their project is actually affordable. So what happens? They come in and they have the ability to ignore all the zoning laws and requests by the neighbors to be able to put in a project. So let's say they put in 100 units, they'll build 10 closets and call them affordable when they're not affordable. They're making their money moreover on the end of selling the other 90 units at high over market rates. Serving on the planning commission here in Connecticut, I'd propose that we jump that number from not 10% affordable housing that goes on in those projects, but maybe 30%. Make these builders and these developers actually help us solve this problem, not take overdeveloped land, exploit it for their own personal needs, and then call it an affordable housing project when they only put 10% in there. If we're going to get through this, and we're seeing through COVID, we're probably going to see even after this is done, we need more affordable housing, and I think that formula definitely needs to be changed.
Okay, to the 26th district, Mr. Haskell.
Such a critical question. Look, I believe that we need to build a community that's more affordable. I think that teachers and firefighters and police officers who work here should also be afforded to live here. I think that seniors who have built their lives here but might want to downsize should be afforded to retire in Connecticut. And most critically to our 21st century economy, I think that young people who gain an education here in Connecticut should be able to afford to stay in Connecticut. But at the same time, I also believe in the local control of our zoning. And I don't think that those are contradictory beliefs. The state can play a role in supporting towns, maybe investing in transit-oriented development, because we know that transportation is inextricably linked to the idea of housing. But at the end of the day, the best people to make Ridgefield more affordable, more inclusive, more welcoming, they're the volunteers who are in Ridgefield themselves. At the state level, my focus is drawing the next generation of workers back to Connecticut. So I wrote a new tax credit to help recent graduates pay off their student loan debt and afford their first home. It's why I've been endorsed by the Connecticut Realtors Association. And it's why I believe that greater diversity in our community, it's not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do to attract the next generation of home buyers.
Okay. Ms. Healy.
Hi. So I think, could you just go back to the question? Because I think it's
Yes.
broken up into parts there. So I'm not sure. I
All
want to
right.
make sure I answer it correctly.
Let me re-ask. How can the legislature address the lack of affordable housing in many municipalities, including Ridgefield, that is the result of exclusionary zoning and land use policies? Do you support 830G, or would you modify it? And if so, how?
So I think the legislature actually should step away from trying to interfere with how affordable housing is brought into our towns. I've met with a lot of the P&Z and housing people in a lot of the towns in the 26th district, and they are working on trying to bring more affordable housing into their districts. When it comes to 830G, I think that it needs a lot of work. I think it ties the hands of the local control issue and does give a lot more power to the developers and doesn't really ever get you to the numbers that you need to actually qualify as having enough affordable housing in your town. You know, again, that 10%, it's almost virtually impossible because the denominator, whenever the developers build, goes up and the numerator, you know, may creep up, but it doesn't ever get you to the 10%. So I would like to see possibly removing that deed restriction and using some of the affordable housing we have already to qualify for affordable housing.
All right, to the 111th, the same question, starting with Mr. Hebert.
And that was the same question, right? 830G? Okay. I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Yeah, I think there's some merits to the 830G but exemption, but I do think that it does need some work. As several people have pointed out, the 10% minimum that we're required to achieve in terms of affordable units within Connecticut or in throughout the state, Ridgefield will never be able to accomplish that. So to Kim's point, I do believe that, yes, Ridgefield has done a very good job. We have a wide range of housing. The only problem we have is not all of our housing that would qualify is deed restricted. So I think we need to look at opening up or giving some point credit toward the 830G exemption by including homes that are not, that would typically qualify but are not deed restricted. Secondly, I do believe that we do need to keep local zoning. We need to keep zoning local. Again, Ridgefield has done a very good job of maintaining affordable housing and a mix of housing. So keep it local, and amendments to 830G are welcome.
All right, and last but not least, Ms. Berger-Zavala.
830G has done a great job of serving builders. So let's not make a mistake and say that I've said that 830G has done a great job. It serves big builders, developers, real estate investors. It has not done the thing that Will addressed, which is help to bring those who work in our community. It hasn't given them the opportunity to live here. We need to have better affordable housing options so that our teachers, our police department, our fire department, they can be here. We also need absolutely to be able to keep seniors. As I'm talking to people on the phones and at their doors, seniors are very concerned that they can no longer afford to stay in our community. And the limited affordable housing that we have for seniors has wait lists that far exceed anything reasonable. We also need to understand, yes, local control must remain. We have to look at the entire community, and we have to look at all of the impacted parties. Every aspect of any amendment that is made or any new legislation that is proposed absolutely must include those who are seeking the affordable housing, as well as any member of the community who would be impacted by it.
All right. Is there any rebuttal on the question on housing? All right. Next question, we'll start with the candidates for the 26th State Senate District. And there are going to be two questions. This one and the next one will both deal with taxes and revenue. This one starts with Mr. Haskell. What alternative revenue streams, if any, would you suggest to keep Connecticut fiscally sound in future years?
Well, I'm glad that we're talking about the fiscal challenges that Connecticut faces, because honestly, as I go door to door, this is front of mind for a lot of folks. It's always true in every election in Connecticut, but especially during this economic downturn precipitated by the virus. It took us decades to get into this fiscal mess, and it's going to take some time for Connecticut to get out of it. So anyone who's in this forum or in this state promising a silver bullet, some brand new form of tax revenue, they're probably not telling you the full story. We should take a serious look at sports betting, something that so many other states around us have already done. We should take, I'm sure we'll talk about transportation later, but we should take a serious look at charging a user fees for those on our roads and our highways who have a wear and tear on our infrastructure without contributing. But look, let's also talk a little bit about the silver lining here. There's a $30 million budget surplus this year. That money is desperately needed to keep critical services going, but our rainy day fund has now reached a historic $3.1 billion. That's thanks to those of us who fought up in Hartford against any raids to that fund. We wanted to make sure Connecticut could afford to keep the lights on in the event of an economic downturn. We've also stopped offering those expensive tier 1 pension contracts. These days, if you sign up to work for the state government, you'll get a tier 4, you get a 403B. It looks a lot like the 401k that you might get in the private sector. And most importantly, we are saving for the future so that the next generation of voters and of taxpayers, they don't inherit this fiscal mess, this cloud of unfunded liabilities that hang over our heads. As the youngest member of the General Assembly, I promise you, I spend a lot more time thinking about Connecticut's fiscal future than I do relitigating yesterday's mistakes.
All right, that is time. Ms. Healy.
Hi. So I kind of look at this from another perspective, just looking at affordability. I can't think of any new revenue source that our taxpayers could shoulder at this point. We are the second highest taxed people in the country, and we've had enough. We have to do whatever it takes to reduce any tax burden that we have.
All right, do you have anything further to say on that?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. In that case, next answer on this one, Mr. Hebert.
Yeah, I would agree with the statement that there's no silver bullet that's going to correct this immediately. It has been, we've had decades of, unchallenged spending, and we're sitting here facing a huge budget deficit this year, and we're going to have a deficit going into the future. So how do we fix the problem? We have to fix the problem by creating economic prosperity for everyone and creating jobs. And then I think we need to really start looking at reducing the amount of state mandates that we have, and start looking in other areas where we can reduce costs to the state. There should be, in my view, we should have a rollback of some of the 1,400 unfunded mandates that add additional costs to the towns and municipalities. I would also propose that we look at our legislation and put sunset laws so we can look and see what the economic impact is on these laws on the municipalities and on the taxpayers, so they don't stay on the books for a long period of time. Complex question, hard to answer in a minute and a half.
All right. Ms. Berger-Zavala?
So the theme of this is obviously that there's no easy answer. We can't be looking at short-term solutions. We can no longer rely on the idea that that the solutions that we've used in the past are going to continue to work for us. This is a failed model of gutting programs in order to try and find revenue. That doesn't work. We've got to be able to eliminate tax loopholes. We've got lots of 1%ers in this state who are not contributing the way that workers who are making hourly wages are. We've obviously have to look at things that other states are doing. Will is correct. Sports betting is a tremendous opportunity for us. Being able to look at the highways and those fees, absolutely. But we also need to look at cost sharing. We need to look at opportunities for consolidation in areas that we can. And then we also need to become a more desirable state for new businesses. We talk about bringing in alternate revenue streams. Let's bring in new kinds of businesses, renewable energy businesses, things that will not only benefit us in other areas like the environment, but also bring a very reliable new stream of revenue into the state.
Okay, and Mr. Gucker.
So one of the things that I talked about 2 years ago was Connecticut keeps finding that we should cut our way to the bottom. If anything that COVID has shown us is that has not worked. How many people tried to file for unemployment to find out that our unemployment system is still running on cobalt that hasn't been used since the 80s. It's outdated, it doesn't work. Anybody who's had to deal with motor vehicle, with trying to get their license renewed or their car re-registered, has realized how much our system has been gutted to where there's nobody there answering the phones. I spend at least 2 to 3 hours every week trying to take care of people's unemployment problems, trying to take care of people's motor vehicle problems, trying to help people just navigate basic services that Connecticut should have. But sadly, over the years, it's been cut. And like I said 2 years ago, I think this is a prime time for Connecticut to reinvest back in our system. Connecticut be more attractive to businesses, to small families and others, when they could do more things, say online, maybe be able to pick up that phone and make that call and get what they need. We've been going through this. We have to stop cutting our way to the bottom and actually look at reinvesting. Your biggest immigrants that are coming into this area right now, Ridgefield and Danbury, are not immigrants. They're people moving out of New York and moving from Westchester and moving into our area. Those people are our drivers that are going to bring us forward with new ideas, taking care of the housing stock that we have, and maybe bringing in some new ideas. We need to invest and stop cutting.
Okay, thank you all. Is there any rebuttal on that one? Yes, go ahead.
I find that really surprising that you say cutting. I haven't seen any cutting happening. I mean, our spending just keeps going up and up and up. Our overall budget last year went up. What's actually being cut? Where is all the money going? I mean, my understanding is that we spend 5 times more per mile to build our roads than anywhere in the country. Where are these cuts?
All right, any other rebuttal or extension? Yes, Mr. Gucker, 30 seconds.
So if you've ever seen a job project that goes on in Connecticut, you want to talk about the cost a mile, why don't we talk about the situation where I have a project up the street that's been going on for a year and a half, to where the federal government has set the projects on what it should cost, who we should hire, and get the lowest bidder. And then when that bidder goes south, we have to then go to the bonding agency to get that new company in there, who's also the lowest bidder, who then just seems to drag out the project and make things worse. We need to really look at how Connecticut puts the, okay, my thing's done, but we need to look at what we're doing.
All right. The next question also relates to revenue. This was going to start again in the 26th, but we'll start with Ms. Healy first. Connecticut state and local government taxes take 12.6% of personal income. That is not just state, but state and local. If elected, would you support cutting the state income tax or the corporate tax rate? And if so, where would you find offsetting revenue? Ms. Healy.
Hi, I like it has been said already. I mean, we've been with a majority party in our state for over 40 years, kind of getting us into this mess. I think it's going to take a lot of time and effort and really digging deep into the numbers to get us out. I would obviously like to see us be able to lower our income and our corporate tax rates. Do I know if that can actually be done right away? Probably not. We're going to have to really look closely. I mean, an auditor, I was an auditor, so I know that the savings are there. There's been a lot of fiscal irresponsibility happening in our state. We hear about it all the time. Like I said, we're the second highest taxed state in the country. We need to really get back down to business and do the hard work and figure out where the problems are. But again, I would love to see those rates cut to bring more prosperity back to our country, to our state.
All right, Mr. Haskell.
So I think this is just another example of where what happens in Washington does impact what happens in Connecticut. The $10,000 cap on state and local taxes was absolutely devastating to our area. It amounted to a huge tax increase because the average deduction in my district is over $40,000. But of course, we have a role to play. We can't just sit and cross our fingers and wait for Washington to change. I actually helped pass a new law with the legislator out in Eastern Connecticut, totally different district. But we said, look, employees who work for the state government, if they come forward to report wasteful or duplicative spending, they should receive a small reward, maybe 10% of the savings that it results in, according to the auditors the next year. That passed along bipartisan lines and was signed into law by the governor. I actually also helped write a tax credit to reduce corporate tax liabilities, but not just for cutting taxes for businesses. We wanted to do some good for the young people who currently can't afford to move back to Connecticut because we have the highest student loan debt per capita in the country. So we said, look, any business that helps to pay off a recent graduate student debt, we will reduce their corporate tax liability. Look, specificity matters. I think that voters honestly deserve to know exactly which line items and exactly which budgets should be cut. If you're going to be if you're running for office and you say you want to cut taxes, we've made some small progress over the last 2 years, eliminating the business entity tax, continuing the phase out on Social Security and pensions. But there's a lot more work to do in this area, both in Hartford and in Washington, and we need strong partnerships.
Okay, to the 111th district, Ms. Berger-Chavalas, same question.
I think we make the mistake when we're looking at this of not looking at the nuance of the conversation. We cannot put families and small businesses in the same category as corporations, and tax rates need to reflect that what some families are bringing in is not the same thing as other families, and that we have this wide spectrum of income in this state, and that needs to be realized. We need to understand that you're never going to rebuild an economy by providing poverty level wages, and that means that the people who are earning lower wages also, we need to pay very close attention to the taxes that we are levying on them in their income. So how do we fix this? Well, we've got to make sure that those voices are also being heard in Hartford. This cannot be a conversation that's just happening with the corporations. It cannot be a conversation that's just happening with a certain percentage of the state and its residents. Every single person deserves a voice here, and we have to remember who is being affected most deeply by these taxes. And we need to be understanding that it has to be graded, and it cannot be a unilateral decision.
Okay, Mr. Hebert.
Yeah, I have I'm going to come at this as a business owner, having started businesses in Connecticut. And I will tell you that businesses and corporations and local businesses, they are people. And if we take a look at what's happening in our state for the last several years, our taxes have increased on businesses, on small businesses, on entrepreneurs, and we're driving these people out of the state. We've lost GE. We've lost, many other businesses, and I've seen in Ridgefield a number of small businesses that have picked up and moved their businesses to other states. Yes, we do need, and I would support appropriate tax cuts. And to sit here right now without having all the details and tell you exactly what they should be, I can't do that. But what I do subscribe to is a policy, a thoughtful policy of reducing taxes for both businesses and individuals, and doing it, over a period of time where we can, and bring businesses back. We bring businesses back, we'll lift everybody up.
Okay, Mr. Gopper?
So the one thing that we discussed in the last time we've had this forum, and it really kind of gets under my skin a bit, is the GE argument. GE did not leave Connecticut because of our taxes. GE got a sweetheart deal in Massachusetts. GE then went up to Massachusetts and didn't follow through on their promises that they guaranteed the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and it subsequently went out anyway. And all those workers that supposedly lost their positions in GE actually went to go work for a different company under their umbrella in Fairfield, Connecticut. So those jobs did not go anywhere. Now I see here in the city of Danbury that actually business and jobs are picking up. I see the low unemployment that is going on. I see entrepreneurs sticking up. And what has really been the hard point has been how to deal with all this through a COVID environment. It's causing us to actually have to look at things at a harder basis of how do we go forward and really compete around the state. Now, more people, again, like I said earlier, are moving into Connecticut, not moving out. It's a trend that is building. And I think that Connecticut is on the forefront of actually going forward. Amazon just moved into Danbury. Other companies are moving in. We have the ability here. We just have to be able to open up those doors. And to hear GE and everybody are running away, no. They were like most corporations. They were like, what can they get out of it? What can they get for themselves? How can they best do better for the stockholders and not the people that work for them, and not for what's good for the state? So going forward, I think Connecticut has a golden opportunity to be able to just go forward with this new environment.
All right, is there any rebuttal on this question? All right, thank you all. Next question will be on a completely different topic, and we start back with the 111th district again. Should the state support school regionalization as a cost-saving measure for the state budget? And this goes to Mr. Hebert first.
No, I would not support any efforts whatsoever to regionalize our schools. When you look at, if we really stop and look at the math behind this, the taxes that, the real estate taxes that our residents pay go largely towards our schools, as well as our police, fire, and other services. By regionalizing schools, that's going to give other communities, it's an opportunity to grab onto the local taxpayers, Ridgefield taxpayer money for the schools that we spend, quite frankly, over $100 million a year, including operating expenses as well as capital expenses. People move to Ridgefield for the school systems. I think there are other ways that we can help build up and support the other school systems with our income tax money, but to take our real estate tax money and move it into other communities, and then ultimately have to increase our taxes again makes no sense whatsoever to me. So no, I would oppose any efforts to consider regionalizing our school systems. Sharing of purchase power sharing, I would subscribe to that.
Sorry, time. Ms. Berger-Chavalos, same question?
I'm actually very glad to be able to answer this question, because it is certainly one that there have been assumptions made and mischaracterizations based solely on my being a Democrat. I think we need to be very clear here. I do not support regionalization. It is not practical, nor is applicable to most towns in our state. Municipalities do need to keep local control when it comes to education. I maintain that, absolutely. But I do support cost sharing without changing districts and boundaries. Why aren't we sharing the costs of administration? Why aren't we sharing the costs of healthcare among all the teachers? Imagine the savings we would have if every teacher in the state, every public school teacher, every public school paraeducator or custodian was on the same health insurance plan. Who would object to cost sharing? I can't imagine anybody would. But from a very practical perspective, as a mom here in Ridgefield, of course I don't want my kids on a bus that for an hour each direction going to other schools and districts for the sake of regionalization. It's not practical, it's not healthy. So I think it's time to clear up the conversation about regionalization and understand where we can actually find opportunities to cost share.
All right, Mr. Gunther.
I'll make this really quick. I agree with everything that Amy said, and with regionalization, I think if we can share, cost buying as far as books, computers, and things of that sort, we should definitely look into that aspect. So yes, cost sharing, absolutely. Regionalization as far as busing, no. And maybe we should also start looking into maybe some school choice options as well, to maybe be able to take up some of the money that the state offers to maybe help some other communities that are overburdened, such as Danbury, who has the largest high school in the state of Connecticut and is looking to expand.
All right, Mr. Haskell.
Like Amy said, really grateful that this was asked so that we could clear up some of the misinformation that's out there on social media. I've been out door knocking a lot, meeting a lot of new families that are choosing Ridgefield and choosing Fairfield County. By far and away, the vast majority tell me that they chose this community because of the high quality of our public schools. That's why up in Hartford, I opposed regionalization on the very same day that it was proposed, organizing some fellow Democrats to issue a statement. I came back to Ridgefield, talked to my constituents about why I thought it was a bad idea. Then I went back up to Hartford and testified alongside many of my neighbors, many educators in our district, in the education committee. I fought to make sure that that bill never received a vote in the Senate. But look, candidates should not just tell you what they're against, right? We're running for an office. I want to tell you what I'm for. I think that Connecticut needs to do a better job of integrating computer science curricula into our public schools so that our students are prepared for a 21st century workforce. I think that we need to stop thinking about K through 12 and start thinking about K through 14, because 70% of the jobs in Connecticut will require some degree beyond a high school diploma. And finally, I think that we need to invest in our public schools now more than ever. Compare Connecticut to 49 other states. We've spent a greater percentage of our federal aid dollars on K through 12 education than any other state in the country. It's because that's what makes Ridgefield and it's what makes the 26th district so special. So you can count on me to oppose bad ideas like school regionalization, but also to fight for things that will make our schools better, and during this crisis will make our schools safe for students, for teachers, for families.
Time. All right, Ms. Healy.
All right, hi. Yes, so I also oppose regionalization of schools. I moved here myself and chose Wilton because of its stellar school system. I am not happy to pay my property taxes, but understand that I am paying a lot in property taxes because it does go to my schools. With regards to cost sharing, I would be for it, but only if it's decided at the town level. I don't think that we should interfere as legislatures in deciding if things need to be shared amongst different municipalities. I think that we should address the problems of the schools where they are. And if our inner city schools need help, then we should provide our best practices that we have here in our town, since we have excellent schools, and try to help them do better. My understanding is we pay about 40% of our income taxes to the state. We get very little back, and a lot of that is turned around and sent to the cities to support them. We're happy to do that, but we need to leave our local control where it is.
All right, any rebuttal on the school regionalization question? All right, next question also goes to the 111th district first, but it starts with Ms. Berger-Gervallo. The LGBTQ community currently has legal protections concerning access to healthcare and health insurance, as well as transgender students' rights to participate in sports. Do you support those protections, or would you support repealing or modifying them in any way? Ms. Berger-Gervallo.
If we're talking about supporting protections for any human being, and it falls under the issue of equality, of course I support those protections. As far as marriage equality, I would oppose any repeal. I have difficulty understanding anyone who wouldn't. It's any move that undermines equality of any kind, I will object completely. And that also includes any issue that is directed toward the transgender community. a person's genetic makeup, internal, external reproductive anatomy. This should never limit anyone's access to any right, and it should never limit anyone's access to something that someone right next to them has. It makes absolutely no sense to me. So yes, I would absolutely oppose anything that negatively impacted either of these communities.
Mr. Hebert.
Personally, my values stem from under a simple principle of liberty, life, dignity, and respect for all people. I believe that every person has a right to be treated with dignity. They should have the freedom to be who they want to be without judgment. They should have the right to be respected for their beliefs, even if their beliefs are not aligned with mine. And they should have the right to life, the right to grow up healthy, and the right to be who they were created to be. So as far as what was the other question about repealing?
The question is basically, would you support the protections currently in state law, or would you support repealing or modifying them in any way?
Yeah, I'd have to look at, I mean, that's a very good question. I'd have to look at those bills to see if, or those laws to see, what the details of them and before I could respond to repealing or keeping any of them.
Okay. To the 26th district, Ms. Healy first.
Hi. I unfortunately don't know what those laws are either. But as a mom, we have to be welcoming to everybody, and no matter where they come from. I have 2 children launching off into the adult world, and, you can raise your children to be a particular way, but they become who they're going to become. And we love them no matter what they choose and who they choose to love, and want to support them with their life's choices. So I would very much come with this with compassion and an open mind, and, welcome learning more about what the laws we have here are.
Okay, Mr. Haskell.
Yeah, I'm really glad this came up. So thanks to the audience member who submitted this question. To clear up any confusion, the law in Connecticut is that you compete in as the gender with which you identify. Connecticut is standing up for transgender students. Well, once again, what happens in Washington is impacting us here at home, because the federal government has said, no, we're going to deny funding for schools in Connecticut because we're allowing students to be who they are. There's a great Maya Angelou quote that comes to mind: when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. But look, there's a lot more work to do beyond just what I view as really a proxy fight over a broader cultural war. We should talk about the fact that 85% of LGBTQ students have been the target of a homophobic remark in our schools. That is a crisis. That's why I supported a ban on gay panic defense, because there's no excuse for reacting violently to another person's sex, their gender, or their sexuality. And by the way, this may seem like a small issue, but it's personal for my family. My older brother and his husband are expecting their 2nd child in November. So I actually fought not just for the Connecticut Parentage Act, which fully recognizes the relationship between a non-biological parent and a child, but I fought to promote access in diaper changing tables for both men's rooms and women's rooms. Too often, when my brother and his husband are out in public, there's no place for them to change their child. It's time to recognize that 21st century families don't all look the same. So yes, of course, allow students to compete in the gender with which they identify, but there's a lot more work to do on this issue.
Okay, and that was time. Is there any rebuttal on this round of questions?
Well, I'll just answer it since I answered to begin with, but I agree with everything that Will said.
Thanks, Ken.
All right. The next question, we'll start with Mr. Gucker first, and it's about healthcare. The Connecticut Insurance Exchange currently adheres to the provisions of the Affordable Care Act in regards to covering pre-existing conditions, which may indeed end up including COVID-19 exposure. If actions are taken federally or by the Supreme Court to limit the ACA, what should Connecticut do to stop insurers from denying coverage for pre-existing conditions?
One of the things that I've been passionate about for years, in fact, there was a book written by Wendell Potter called Deadly Spin, and it dealt with the dirty things that the insurance industry was doing to their insured. And one of the things was pre-existing conditions. Believe it or not, as a woman, you can have a pre-existing condition. You have a menstrual cycle. You have a pre-existing condition. We can deny you. Connecticut, purposely looking at what's going on in Washington, stepped up and codified a lot of the pieces of the Affordable Care Act to ensure that we don't go back to those draconian days of the insurance company telling you, I'm sorry, your loved one's dying, but hey, too bad you have a pre-existing condition. You got a blister on your pinky back when you were 12 years old. We need to ensure that pre-existing conditions are not taken into effect. We need to ensure that people are taken care of, and the insurance lobby and insurance companies don't go back to the things they've done. It's deplorable right now that the Supreme Court is doing all that they can to dismantle this. It is, we've gone so far, and yet we're looking to go backwards. Why? Because of talking points, because of profit margins. I mean, before the Affordable Care Act, 80% of the money that you paid in benefits would go to the CEOs and not to healthcare. We cannot go backwards on that. We need to ensure that we keep those codified positions in place. We need to take care of each other. We all talk about looking after each other and taking care of each other. This is proof that we're going to do that.
All right. I'm afraid that's time. Mr. Haskell, the question goes to you.
Sure. So it's an important time to talk about healthcare access, given the fact that our community needs access to care more than ever, and yet it's becoming unaffordable. And this is a trend that's been going on for far too long. So I was really proud to support a bill in the Senate that protects coverage for those with pre-existing conditions, regardless of what happens at the Supreme Court. Because in the wake of Justice Ginsburg's death, that is what is at stake in this election. Amy and I stood on Ridgefield's town hall just a few days ago talking with Senator Blumenthal about the fight coming up in Washington. 130 million Americans have pre-existing conditions. So in Connecticut, we're going to make sure that those folks aren't discriminated against. And Ken already made that point more eloquently than I could. So let me just go on to say that another area where Hartford is pushing further is we came up in a special session in July to cap the cost of insulin. Pharmaceutical companies are making more money than ever off of insulin, despite the fact that producing it hasn't gotten any more expensive. So of course, when 25% of Americans have to ration their insulin because it's too expensive, that's, by the way, threatening to their lives and to their livelihood, well, then Connecticut is going to step up to the plate. And it's why I've fought every day for a public option. Not only would it be great for the state if small businesses and those who are self-employed and those who work for nonprofits can buy into the state's healthcare plan, it would also be the best thing we could do for small businesses. Go and talk to a small business owner. They'll tell you that the price of healthcare is making business in Connecticut unaffordable. So making sure that those folks, the 700,000 people who work for small businesses, more than half of whom don't currently have healthcare, to make sure that they're covered during a public health crisis, that's got to be a top priority.
Okay, that's time. Thank you. Ms. Healy.
Yes, hi. I would agree that we need to make sure that pre-existing conditions are covered. I mean, I remember when I first started working, they weren't. And so you would like to switch jobs just so that they were. You'd kind of qualify for that open part of the policy. But as somebody who actually did tax returns or did taxes for people right when the Affordable Care Act came into play, I can tell you that low-income people found it very, very difficult to pay for that insurance policy. And those that did, say, qualify for credits found themselves a lot of times at the end of the year when they would do their returns having to pay that money back. And then even if they did or were able to afford the policy, they found that the deductibles were way too high, that they actually couldn't afford to go to the doctor anyway. So I found more problems with the Affordable Care Act than were benefits, unless you qualify for the credit. And usually those people qualify for Medicaid anyway. So, you know, I would definitely take a different approach. I totally agree that healthcare is too expensive. that is a beast that needs to be tackled. And I don't think that was part of the question. So I won't even attempt to answer.
All right, same question to Mr. Hebert.
Yeah, I would agree with what Kim had said here. Pre-existing conditions, of course, we want that. We want to make sure we keep that included. Access to health care for everyone is obviously very important. And I believe that the cost of, there was a cap put on by this administration on the cost of insulin, if I'm not mistaken. There was a cap, I think it was 10%, a 10% cap on the cost of insulation. So I think that's already been covered. And then I don't know if I can put this as a question, but I think, Mr. Haskell, you said that there was 80% of the premiums, is that what I heard you say, go to the CEOs? The 80% of the premiums? Or did you say that, Ken? Okay,
That appears to be a yes from Mr. Cocker.
Okay, that is true that 80% of the premiums that we pay go directly to CEOs.
Do I answer? I know you have a forum. Before the Affordable Care Act, it was going there. We changed that to where they couldn't do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I will not count that as a rebuttal, by the way. All right, anything further, Mr. Hebert?
I'm sorry?
Anything further?
No, my time is up.
Okay, fair enough. Ms. Berger-Javallo.
Of course, we cannot deny coverage for pre-existing conditions. That's actually a concern that is being raised on a very regular basis as I talk to voters right now. And I can assure that I would never support that. COVID highlighted such a gap in our healthcare. The hundreds of thousands of uninsured that Will mentioned only increased with COVID when people lost their employment. We have to look at healthcare holistically. We have to look at it not just those pieces that are going to come at us from the eliminate little bits that are being chipped away with the ACA. We also have to look at how it's tied to employment. And we have to look at how premiums are so high that even families with health insurance don't always go to see their doctor because they know that they can't afford that after they have paid whatever premiums they have in copays. We also need to remove, to Will's point, this burden from small businesses. We absolutely have to provide some sort of a public option. We need to understand that we already pay a massive healthcare tax, and as has been already said by my partners, that tax goes directly to the insurance. That goes to the for-profit insurance, and with a public option, we can offer quality healthcare insurance to the residents of Connecticut and not be able to force them into, pardon me, I'm done.
Sorry, that's fine. Does anybody wish to rebut on this question? All right. The next question starts with the candidates for the 26th State Senate District. Connecticut has a reproductive rights law based on Roe versus Wade. If the U.S. Supreme Court overturns Roe or modifies it significantly, should Connecticut's law be changed in any way? Start with Mr. Haskell.
Yeah, thank you for this question as well. In the wake of Justice Ginsburg's death, reproductive health care is now on the ballot in this election. And like you said, Connecticut has codified Roe versus Wade, meaning it's in our state statutes. But if the court strikes down the right to have an abortion, the only thing standing between women in this state and the whim of a conservative supermajority on the court is a vote in the Connecticut State Senate. There's only one candidate in this race who's been endorsed by Planned Parenthood and NARAL. So if these are the stakes, we can't have anyone who equivocates or says, let's wait and see what happens. Fundamentally, though, reproductive health care is about women's autonomy. So, of course, let's fight for every person's right to have an abortion. But let's also take on crisis pregnancy centers, which falsely advertise to pregnant women about what sort of services they can provide. Let's fight to make sure that workplaces are fair and equitable. That's why I co-sponsored the Time's Up Act, which shortens the statute of limitations to seek justice in civil and criminal court, but also supported the paid family and medical leave law. because women too often are driven out of the workforce by structural inequalities and by predatory behavior. So rest assured, I'll fight to protect Roe v. Wade, but the conversation about gender and sex and equity, it can't stop there.
Ms. Healy.
Hi. So as a woman, and I have a daughter, obviously this is extremely important to me. Connecticut has protections for women's reproductive health. I don't anticipate or see any reason to change them. I also do not see this as a big issue on this ticket. I don't think that even putting another conservative justice on the Supreme Court is going to have any effect of that. They are responsible. I mean, they will listen to the American people, and I just don't see this as being an issue here in Connecticut. You know, we need to respect everyone's opinion on this. It's an extremely sensitive matter, and it should not be taken lightly. And you know, we need to meet people where they are. So, but it's covered in Connecticut, and there's really no reason to believe or be fooled into thinking that there's any risk to losing it here.
All right. To Mr. Hebert.
Yeah, I don't have a lot more to add on that other than the fact that this is not going to be an issue that we're going to be voting on. This is enshrined in the Connecticut state, statute, constitution, state constitution, and like I said, it's not going to be an issue that we're going to be voting on. So I think we should be talking more about the issues that are going to affect us, directly right here in town. Although I would like to, with regards to that, I would like to add that with what Clinton said, that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. And, I think that, and it has become an industry that's being funded with taxpayer money right now. So, but that's not a decision that we're going to be dealing with in the future, in the near
Ms.
future.
Berger-Chavallo, same question.
I'm a little disturbed by some of the complacency on this. I think it's absurd to think that this will not be a big issue on this ticket. I know that there are many people who are supporting particular candidates specifically because of their issue, because of their point of view on this issue, rather. Every person needs to be able to decide for herself if and when and with whom she wants to start a family. And anti-abortion laws, they threaten the fundamental equality of women. This is not just a matter of choice, it is a legal matter of privacy, as Roe v. Wade was to begin with. And women have the ability to make these decisions for themselves, and they should be afforded that. But even beyond that, so if we take the conversation to that next step, access to safe, affordable health care for women and child care, they have decreased the utilization of abortion services. So we can't just look at that one piece of this. We also have to understand, again, holistically, how this issue affects and how it can be affected by putting in supports in other areas. So we definitely have to look at childcare and healthcare when we're talking about this.
Mr. Gucker.
So there's been this thing when we talk about, Planned Parenthood and all, and I'm also endorsed like Will is in these areas. What we don't talk about is education. A lot of what they want to get rid of is education, dealing that maybe, we wouldn't have to deal with abortion, so to speak. We would deal with education where people understand what's going on. They have the tools that they need to be able to make their choice. I don't think we should overturn anything with Roe v. Wade. I think it should stay just the way it is. But I also have problems, and we have had this vote and this discussion in Hartford with these crisis centers that put out misleading information that make women who are most vulnerable at their most vulnerable time not knowing where to turn. Whether they were a victim of incest or rape or, something else and they're looking for someone to go to in their most vulnerable time to talk to somebody who would be compassionate to their issues. And they just convince them, oh, no, you need to go down this certain road. It's very misleading. What we have in Connecticut, these crisis centers, they need to go. It needs to be cleared up. They need to be honest. They need to go. Number two, we need more education. One of the things that Planned Parenthood does more than abortions is education and telling people how to be safe in their life with their family planning and where they want to go. So a lot of that gets twisted around. Whether they change on the Supreme Court, I think here in Connecticut, being the land of steady habits, one of the habits I want to see them have is keep family planning safe. Thank you.
All right, and that is time. Is there any rebuttal on this question? All right, next question.
And
Also,
I think that Bob raised his
oh, I'm
hand.
sorry, I apologize, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to eliminate any confusion here, misrepresentation. First of all, you know, I do express, I'm not taking this issue lightly at all. But we have to understand too that this has already been codified into our into state law. So we are not, this is a nice discussion to have, but this is nothing that we are going to have any votes on or any, it's not going to have an impact on us.
All right, and that was someone, yes, Mr. Haskell, rebuttal?
Yeah, Gene, I'd like to jump in only because all the state Senate and the state House does every day is change what's in state statute. And having spent 2 years there, I know that I've got colleagues who are opposed to a woman's right to choose. Every year there are anti-choice bills proposed. So let's drill down on the specifics on this issue and in every other issue and making sure that who you elect in November should tell you outright how they're going to vote on the issue of reproductive health care. Not that they don't plan to vote on it, because these issues will come up.
All right, any other rebuttal on this question? All right, next question also starts in the 26th district, but with Ms. Healy first. If elected or re-elected, what would you do to fight rising greenhouse gas emissions in Connecticut and to protect Connecticut's natural resources and environment?
Wow, that is a really great question. You know, I think one of the biggest environmental things we have going on here in Connecticut, I believe, is car emissions, which up until March, I guess, after March, I should say, really kind of decreased when nobody was commuting. I think going forward, we want to really try to look at trying to create and develop our economy so that we have more people working in our state, maybe commuting less. We also want to maybe encourage people to work from home more often, again, to keep them off the roads. It is a little worrisome how there's very few people taking the train to work. So I'm not sure how that will affect that. Environmentally, I mean, I grew up near the water. If I had a choice to have a pet project or an important project actually to me would be to clean up Long Island Sound. I know when we first moved here back in '94, you really couldn't swim in the Long Island Sound. I know there's been lots of progress made and I would like to see a lot more be done with that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Haskell.
So one of my favorite things in this job is getting to visit classrooms and meeting with elementary school, middle school, high school students, college students. They all tell me the same thing. Climate change is the defining issue of our generation. It's not an academic anxiety. It is an existential threat to our continued existence. So that's why I was so pleased to get a seat on the Environment Committee. It's why I supported the environment at every turn, earning a 100% score from the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters. And once again, while Washington talked about a Green New Deal that probably wasn't achievable, I helped pass a Connecticut Green New Deal that calls for a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. It makes it more affordable for folks to put solar panels on their own homes. And by the way, when we talk about the Long Island Sound, that's why I fought so hard for the plastic bag ban, because 18 billion pounds of plastic end up in our ocean every year. And we've seen in my hometown of Westport what can happen to consumer behavior when smart regulations encourage environmentally sustainable habits. So we're going to be phasing out plastic bags here in Connecticut, thanks to a law that we helped pass. I know I'm proud of my efforts to ensure that the next generation is going to have an opportunity to enjoy open space, clean air, clean water, all the things that make Connecticut so special. There's a lot more to talk about here, from banning fracking waste to making sure that water is a public trust to passing the Blue Plan. But I see we're running out of time. So anyone who's got further questions, please feel free to reach out to me. It's one of my favorite topics.
All right. Same question to Ms. Berger-Javallo, 111th.
I could really just jump right on to the tail end of what Will said. I'm in complete agreement with every point that he made. We have to be much more proactive. It is this is a dire situation at this point. We can go further. We can incentivize electric and hybrid car ownership through taxes. We can bring renewable energy businesses, as I believe I mentioned earlier, into our state. So we've got opportunities for wind and solar companies to come. We don't have to look very far for inspiration. If you look at Massachusetts, they've been very aggressive in legislating to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. They have a municipal vulnerability preparedness program, I believe it is called, and that helps cities and towns to be able to access what they need in order to reduce their energy consumption, to increase their renewable energy access as well. And then there's also assistance technically and resources for residents. So it looks at it at a very high level, and then it looks at it in the homes as well. And these are things that we could and should be doing.
Okay, Mr. Hebert?
Yeah, I'm very, as a selectman, I'm very proud of the work that Ridgefield has accomplished in our environment. We actually just recently, as the Board of Selectmen, we approved the acquisition of additional open space through our Conservation Commission. We have a very active and viable Conservation Commission. We have a very strong wetlands protection, board. Over the last several years, we've put solar panels on all of our schools. So we're doing a lot, and there's certainly much more that needs to be done. We currently have, I believe it's 2 electric vehicle chargers in town. Our Economic and Development Commission are looking at a study to add more, possibly more EV charging stations in town. So again, very proud of the work that Ridgefield has done, and I'm sure we'll continue to do more work as we go forward. Thank you.
Mr. Gawker?
So one of the things I'm most proud in serving with Will is the Environment Committee. When we were asked what committees we would like to join getting up there as a freshman in Hartford, my number one was environment. Anybody who knows me from this area knows my activism with dealing with open space issues, stormwater runoff issues, protecting open space. But going beyond that, how we can get through the Green New Deal or get through clean energy. Representative David Michel from Stanford had a great idea. Windmills, the windmills that we're building out in the Long Island Sound, instead of doing a which is piling 30-foot diameter pipes into the seabed, they would do this gravity-based situation. This gravity base would have given jobs to Bridgeport as far as carpenters, as far as steel workers, as far as concrete workers, along with the supply chain to say O&G and other suppliers. What a gravity-based system is that you build these, what looks like an upside down wine glass of concrete. They float them out to where they need to be installed. They fill them with sand. They sink to the bottom and they're anchored. And it does not have the negative effect to the sea life. It provides jobs for people here, and it's less environmentally invasive. And if they need repair, they pump the sand back out, bring them back in, and it's much better. And on top of that, we wanted to look at working with our recycling stream, which I know I'm going to be out of time in like 38 seconds here. So we could discuss that at another point, but very happy, and we're going forward. That's what we need to do. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any rebuttal or further discussion on the environment question? All right, next question is going to start back in the 111th. It's on the minimum wage. Connecticut's minimum wage just increased from $11 to $12 an hour. Studies show that a family of 4 in the state of Connecticut needs $28.61 per working adult to make wages suitable for the basic clothing, etc. Do you support implementing a living wage? If not, please explain your reasoning. And this one starts with Mr. Hebert first.
I will keep an open mind and look up at any and all proposed, legislation. However, I don't know that supporting a living wage is necessarily the best way to go. I think what we do need to do is, again, fix our economy, bring jobs back to the state, and create living wages through employment and job opportunities and economic prosperity for everyone. When we take a look at the minimum wage that was just recently passed, you look at the impact that that's had on small businesses and municipalities. Particularly here in Ridgefield, when we passed that, we looked at a significant increase to our town budget because of the people that you increase the minimum wage, and then the people that are just above that, then they expect increases, and this has a dramatic impact on the economy and on the municipalities. So we have to look at the effect of a living wage as well as an increase to the minimum wage.
Okay, Ms. Berger-Zavala?
When we're talking about a living wage, we're talking about people who are already employed. So while I'm in complete agreement that we need to make sure that we are improving our employment numbers, that's not so much going to help the folks who are making $15 an hour and not able to support themselves in their homes and feeding their children and all of the most basic needs that the rest of us have. Underpaying people, it creates more poverty. This is a fact. We need to be able to then supplement those who aren't making a living wage, and that comes from the state in the forms of Medicaid and WIC programs. If our tax base expands because we are paying a living wage, we have more of a tax base from which to draw. So the idea that a $28 an hour living wage would bankrupt us doesn't look at the big picture. And the more people that we get off of public assistance, the better for the state. So yes, a living wage, absolutely. I'm not entirely sure who could look anyone in the eye and say, you work 40 hours a week, but you don't deserve a living wage for that.
All right, Mr. Gucker?
I'm in total agreement with what Amy was saying. You know, the biggest use of our social programs here in Connecticut is the employees of Walmart. Walmart doesn't get paid enough to where they can't afford to get health insurance. They can't afford to feed their family. I mean, we saw it during the COVID outbreak here, where we extended the SNAP program to kids going to school. That yes, they were staying at home, but those families relied on those free lunches to help them get through the month of expenses. With the increase of the unemployment, or not the unemployment, I'm sorry, the minimum wage, that's not being phased in for 5 years, basically by the time it's done. And by the time we finally get it up to $15 an hour, which is still, $13 less than what you're saying a living wage is at this point, that living wage is going to be even higher. So yes, I would support going farther. And I said this 2 years ago, I would support going farther than we have gone at this point. All low tide raises all boats, and we need to take care of our most vulnerable, and we need to make sure that everybody's taken care of. And, families are having a rough time, especially with this COVID situation. I know small businesses are having a rough time as well with paying. I'm a small business owner. I understand it. I get it. But I also know that I can never hire someone to work and do the work I need them to do at today's minimum wage. In fact, Will probably get along with this. We don't even make minimum wage in the capital. So somewhere, maybe we can get some minimum wage for the rest of us as well.
It's time, thank you. All right, Mr. Haskell.
Sure. I'm really glad that Ken brought up the timeline point. When this bill came before the state Senate, I was a part of a more moderate group of senators who fought to make sure that it was phased in over 5 years, not something that happened overnight, and that the increases that small businesses and others faced were less than $1 a year. But again, ultimately, I was proud to support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. This new law is going to give 330,000 workers in Connecticut a raise. Think about that number, 330,000 workers in this small state of Connecticut. The majority of minimum wage workers in Connecticut are women, and many of them are struggling to put food on the table for their families or gas in the car. Connecticut suffers from staggering economic inequality that isn't just bad for those on the losing end, it's bad for all of our economy. And what this bill does is empower more consumers to shop at small businesses, to support our economy, and to bring back jobs to Connecticut. So it was ultimately something I was proud to support after the compromises we made in negotiations.
All right, Ms. Healy.
Yes, hi. So I spoke to a legislature, and she told me that there was very little to support the $15 an hour. It was kind of an arbitrary number that had no research behind it. Apparently it was based on a national movement. So I'm not really sure, how other people feel about that, but that's what I was told. Regarding a living wage or however, I wouldn't think that having the legislature make those decisions is a good idea. Really, I would almost come at it as an affordability issue with Connecticut. Why is Connecticut so expensive to live in? We have really high taxes. We have way too much regulation, lots of fiscal irresponsibility. There's not enough jobs. There's not enough quality jobs. And I would even tie it back to education. The people that are probably making these low income jobs didn't get a really good education. And why don't we fix the problems where they lie and work on education and getting really good jobs to come back to Connecticut?
All right. Any rebuttal on this? All right. Next question, also 111th, but with Ms. Berger-Gervalo. Connecticut has enacted a new police accountability bill. Should Connecticut enact further police reforms? And if so, what?
We have this new bill, and of course, one other area that I'm also glad to get the chance to answer this one first. One other area that I think we definitely need to clear up on behalf of the Democrats is, of course, we support our local police. Who doesn't support the police departments? One thing that I would say is we need to take a breath and do this right. So we've got to talk about what we need to do further. One of the most important pieces of this, and this is something that I maintain throughout just about every issue we've discussed, is we have to bring communities like ours to the table to talk about how we should be responding to this. We can and respect and protect all, as long as all of the parties who are affected get to have some say in this conversation. Driving division, as this issue has been used to do, it's never going to be a solution. And we've got to retrain, to rethink, and that is part of what the new measures that were taken are intended to do. Police officers are still allowed to objectively, it still allows for objectively good faith in our police officers. So we just need to be a model for police accountability here in Ridgefield, and I think that we are. So it's something that we can use to meet and exceed in all areas already.
All right, and that's Mr. Hebert.
Yeah, my problem with the police accountability bill is, well, first of all, there are some items in there that make perfect sense. Additional training, ongoing training, even the body cams. The police like that. The only reason Ridgefield didn't have them up until this point was because of trying to maintain reasonable budgets. But we're being squeezed between a movement that wants to defund the police, yet we want to put all these other additional requirements on them. I think that the way this was done in a special session with limited public input, with limited an opportunity to really think through all the implications and the unintended consequences of this bill, that's where I have the problem. There were some good things, but there's also some things in there that are putting our police officers in danger. They're putting our residents in danger, and we need to have thoughtful conversations regarding matters of this importance.
All right, Mr. Gawker?
So the police accountability bill was probably one of the hardest votes I've ever had to take. And the one thing that I'm really upset with is that if you're a Democrat and you voted for this, then you hate the police. My brother-in-law is a captain on a Danbury police force. My friends are police officers. My German great-grandfather, when he came over here in 1905, was a police officer in Manhattan. I come from a long line of police officers, but I also do know that we needed to make some changes, a lot of changes. I've reached out to the head of the FOP many times and said, you've got some bad actors. And if you don't reel them in, this is 10 years ago. If you don't reel them in, there's going to come a time where that option is going to be taken away from you. Well, guess what the police accountability bill did? The police were all upset about how it affects them. It brought back the qualified immunity back to what it was originally formed to be in 1967. Before the police unions picked away every little piece of it to make it to where the police can do whatever they want with no accountability for the public. If you had a lawsuit or if you were harmed or your physical rights or your constitutional rights were not being upheld, you could not bring judgment or a case because it didn't match up to any other cases ever brought before, which are never going to happen because there is no case to be brought up. The police accountability bill works for all. It works to make sure, and they say it was rushed. It wasn't rushed. We had 12 hours of testimony, and I see it says stop.
Okay.
I will follow you after that.
All right, Mr. Haskell, you get this next.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just pick up where Ken left off. This notion that the bill was rushed. You know, for many communities, this bill was actually long overdue, and we've been dancing around the issue, failing to acknowledge that it was a tragedy. We should say his name. It was George Floyd's murder that caused not only change across the country, but folks to march here in Ridgefield and across the 26th district to call attention to racial injustice in policing and more broadly, the inequalities in our criminal justice system. I've gotten to know some amazing officers here in Ridgefield, and the work that they do is remarkable and it is important. But we've got to be honest about the fact that there are problems with policing, even here in Connecticut, even if it's not in our backyard. So I went to Hartford and I worked on a bill that mandates implicit bias training. It imposes transparency over an officer's record so a bad apple can't hop from department to department. It implements body cameras and dashboard cameras, something that most towns in the 26th district already do. And of course, it wasn't a perfect bill. I've voted on a few hundred now, and I've never voted on a perfect bill. But I was really grateful for the input from Ridgefield's chief of police and many other police chiefs, and by the way, lieutenants and sergeants and officers. So we were able to make some changes to the bill before it reached the Senate floor. Look, at the end of the day, I think that you can't march about a problem if you aren't willing to actually roll up your sleeves and do something about it. Black Lives Matter isn't a photo op, it's a call to action. So that's why I supported the bill.
All right, Ms. Healy.
Hi. So I guess I've heard already that this bill was developed especially in reaction to the George Floyd murder, which no one doubts was a murder. I do believe it was a knee-jerk reaction to that. 12 hours of public testimony, I would argue, is way too little. I would have said you probably needed at least 12 days of public testimony. And then I think that people should have actually listened to what the police were telling them when they told them that this was going to be bad. This is basically going to defund our police. The costs, the unfunded mandates that came with this bill are going to reduce police on the streets. It's killing morale. They're going to leave. There'll be no seasoned police to train others and lead by example. And it just kind of circles back to what I've said before. Why didn't we fix the problems where they are? We don't have problems in the 7 towns of our district. 2 of them are CALIA already certified. We don't have issues that they do in the other cities. They should have been able to fix them where they are. And the other thing I would say is, you know what, I'm not even gonna say it. Thank you very much.
All right, is there any rebuttal or anything further on this question? Yes, Ms. Berger-Chavallo, you're first.
I think we have a tendency to get stuck on defund the police and pin that on Democrats in particular. It's being used by the opposition as a slogan and not as a way to dig into what the policy really means. What we have now are some really good first steps. I met with the police commission, with 2 members of the police commission here in Ridgefield. There is support, there is understanding that this was not done with an intention to undermine what our police department does.
Okay, anything further on this? All right, Mr. Haskell.
Okay, I'll jump in. I just wanted to say, to Amy's point, there's a tremendous amount of misinformation out there on this bill, particularly on social media. So I encourage everybody to take the time to read it. It doesn't defund the police, not even close. It actually increases funding, $4 million in bonding, so that towns can afford body cameras and dashboard cameras. It doesn't eliminate qualified immunity. It keeps it in place for the vast majority of officers. It just qualifies it so that victims of egregious misconduct, where an officer violates constitutional rights in a way that's wanton, willful, and malicious, that those folks can seek justice in civil court, because no one should be above the law.
All right, that's time. All right, we are now with that nasty position where we can get in one more question, but not necessarily for a minute and a half each. So I'm going to ask Gannon, if you're timing, 1 minute for each answer for this last question before we go to closing statements. And it's going to be on something which takes a lot more than a minute per person. We're going to start with Mr. Gucker. Are there more gun safety measures that our state should pass? If so, what? If not, why not? Gun safety, 1 minute.
We should do something about these straw buyers that are able to go down to Virginia and buy like van loads of guns and bring them back to Connecticut with no with no background checks. We should look into more safe storage laws. I mean, I was so happy to support Ethan's law that made sure that guns were stored safely, both not at the house, but also in people's cars. Because yes, we had to lock up a gun if it was loaded. But what if the gun was not loaded and the ammunition was laying into the same building, the same dresser drawer as the gun? So I was happy to support those. Let's go after the store buyers. Let's go after the online sales. Let's go buy the thing, go around and deal with the loopholes that are out there. I would like to say a lot more, but I see I've got like no time.
All right, Mr. Haskell.
Yeah, this has been a focus of mine on the Judiciary Committee, and it's been a huge honor to work with people like Jeremy Stein here in Ridgefield and Connecticut Against Gun Violence, Moms Demand Action, and other groups. We passed 3 strong gun laws. Ethan's law, we banned ghost guns so that no one can order a gun through the mail without a serial number, without a background check. But here's a bill that I've been fighting for. I introduced it in 2019 and 2020, and I'll keep fighting for it. We need to ban the bulk purchase of firearms. Right now, if you're approved to buy a firearm, there's no limit as to how many you can buy. I've talked to a lot of gun owners. They don't need to buy more than 1 gun per month. And we can reduce urban gun violence by cracking down on straw purchases. Chances are, if you're going into a gun store to buy 30 handguns, you're going to sell those guns into the hands of those who wouldn't pass a background check. The best part of this job is that you get to emulate what other states are doing and sometimes avoid what other states are doing. Maryland, New Jersey, California, they passed a ban on bulk purchases because they've seen that it can save lives. And it's time to bring that ban of 1 gun per person per month to Connecticut.
All right, that's time. Ms. Healy.
Yes, I believe that we have some of the best gun safety laws in our country. I think that we need to give the police the opportunity to enforce them. We should also look at maybe some more supports regarding mental health and keeping guns out of the hands of criminals. Just circling back to the police accountability bill, one of the other issues that I heard with the removal of their consent search option, they have told me that they fear that this will leave more illegal guns on the street.
All right, Mr. Hebert.
Yeah, I agree with a lot that was said across the line here. Connecticut does have one of the strictest gun control laws in the country. I would support conversations about gun safety. I've said that since the first year that I was on the Board of Selectmen. And we will we want to keep guns from those who, commit violent crimes or who are, dealing with mental health issues. I also believe that, I would support gun safety measures, but I will not support the confiscation of legal guns. And I also, the last point I want to make here is with the police accountability bill, taking SROs out of the schools, I would not support that. I think that we all have, we still have Sandy Hook in the forefront of our minds, and taking SROs out of our schools would be dangerous and irresponsible.
Right. Ms. Berger-Zavala?
I'm going to jump on this really quickly so that I can get to all of it. First of all, as having been endorsed by Moms Demand Action and by Connecticut Against Gun Violence, I am passionate about what Connecticut Against Gun Violence in particular, their mission statement is to reduce gun violence through grassroots engagement. And the upcoming legislation talks about reducing community gun violence, which is so important. And what does that mean to Ridgefield? We don't have a community gun violence problem necessarily here in our community, but we have right next door to us. That's something that we need to be able to address, to be able to stand in solidarity with these other communities. As for the SRO, I think anybody who wants to call the local police department or commission, you'll find out that we actually have a training plan for securing schools in the event of an incident, and the teams of officers are ready with a tactical plan, one that we don't know, one that the police commission doesn't know, because it is an intense tactical plan. So the presence of SROs is not relevant to this.
All right. That's it for time on this question, and I'm not going to ask for rebuttal. At this point, before we get to closing statements, I do want to thank the audience members and league members who submitted the 12 pages of wonderful questions, most of which I never got a chance to ask. But the level of public interest in the races here for the 111th, 138th, and the 26th district is very, very high, and the league appreciates it enormously. Having said that, we are now going to do closing statements. They will be 2 minutes each. There will be no rebuttals, and we're going to go in reverse order of the way we started. So the first statement will be Ms. Healy's statement, please.
Thank you. I actually wrote it down, so I keep it to exactly 2 minutes. So thank you all for listening today. I just want to take a moment to remind the voters of a few things. The Democrat Party supermajority has been in power in Connecticut for nearly 40 years, and the results for this state speak for themselves. Connecticut is at the bottom of virtually every economic metric, and it has been losing population for years, with the temporary exception of the flight from the cities just due to the pandemic. To create enduring change in this state, we need leaders who are willing to make difficult decisions and who are not beholden to special interests in Hartford. In the 26th district, we need leaders who are more concerned with the towns they represent than creating legislation for the advancement of their careers. We need a strong advocate against Hartford's attempt to regionalize our schools and take away our town's authority to control our planning and zoning decisions. We need a senator who stands up for our law enforcement officers and first responders, rather than creating unnecessary impediments to their jobs. We need someone to make Connecticut attractive for our seniors so they don't leave for more affordable states. They've spent their careers investing in us, and we need to invest in them. Despite all of our challenges, Connecticut has considerable potential. Our state boasts remarkable natural beauty, a strong education system, an inspirational history, and a distinct communal spirit. The land of steady habits has long been a state of fiscal responsibility, prudent legislation, and strong independent towns. We have to embrace our incredible past to guide our state into a prosperous future. I'll be the advocate and senator that our towns deserve. I hope to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Haskell.
Well, thank you, Jean, and thanks to the league for putting this together. Thanks to all the other candidates for participating. I've really enjoyed the conversation. 2 years ago, this community took a chance on me. And honestly, this job has been more rewarding than I ever anticipated. I'm in awe of what we accomplished together. We brought paid family and medical leave to Connecticut. We passed a new tax credit to help the next generation afford to live here. We passed 3 strong gun laws that will save lives. But the challenges before us are huge, and you've heard a lot about those tonight. More than 150,000 people in Connecticut were unemployed as of August. We're facing a $2.1 billion budget deficit. And as we discussed, the price of healthcare is skyrocketing at the moment that our community needs access to care more than ever. A president once said that there's nothing that's wrong with America that can't be cured by what's right with America. That rings true about this community in this crisis. There's nothing that's wrong with Connecticut that can't be cured by what's right with Connecticut. I know that because I've held 73 town halls. I've met with commuters on their way to work. I've talked to constituents and learned from them on my way up to Hartford and on my drive home every night. We've got some of the best public schools in the country. I know that because I graduated from one of them. And I know that this crisis has revealed heroes everywhere you look. From the volunteers delivering meals to local hospitals, to the students organizing their friends to sew face masks, to the Connecticut businesses who have shifted their operations to produce PPE, ventilators, and hopefully eventually a vaccine. All of this is possible because we have had some of the most effective containment strategies in the whole country. From customers in stores to teachers in the classrooms to a government in Hartford that understands the importance of wearing a mask. So some are quick to dismiss my optimism as being naive. But I and so many others in this community, we're optimistic about our future because we've seen what happens when we decide to do better. Yeah, we're frustrated by what we see on TV, but rather than throwing up our hands, we're rolling up our sleeves and doing the hard work of making this community a little bit better. It's a tremendous honor to serve the 26th district. I hope to spend another 2 years fighting for you up in Hartford.
Thank you. Mr. Gucker.
I want to thank the league for all that they've done. I've always enjoyed coming to these informative meet the candidates things that are going on. But I will tell you this: what I did not expect when I went to Hartford is how much we can help people, how much people rely on us. You know, and though we had a great first year with a lot of good bills, I think I've co-sponsored 2.5 pages of great bills that went through the legislature that really helped people. But then we came up till March of this year, when the entire Connecticut legislature shut down, when everything had stopped. And how do we go forward? So we found ourselves going from legislators to actually helping people through the rough times, helping people navigate their unemployment issues with an outdated system that should be scrapped and rebuilt, to helping people deal with motor vehicle issues, getting their licenses, getting their cars registered, getting through basic life, to actually helping people get through the foreclosure problem. Because the thing we're going to have to deal with when this is all over with is people are going to be even harder hit when this all stops. When people have to finally pay their mortgages back, when they finally have to catch up with their rent, when they finally have to find out how they're going to survive, we need to be there. A lot of the good bills that we looked at doing this year, I was hoping to get Brian Cody's law through this year, working across the aisles with Billy Buckby from New Milford, dealing with opioid addiction that we see growing and growing all the times. I'm hoping that you'll privilege me with going back to Hartford to finish that unfinished work that we had hoped to get done this year, but was cut short due to this virus. And Connecticut did it right. Connecticut believed in science. Connecticut believed in helping people, and Connecticut is on its way back. So don't believe the haters. Don't believe the misnomers. We want to help. We want to get back. And I hope I'm blessed to go back to Hartford for another 2 more years. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Berger-Chavallo.
There's the unmute. Thank you so much, Jean. Thank you, League of Women Voters, and thank you everybody for being on here. It's a great opportunity to explain the ways that we do want to help the people of our communities. With that said, let's address the environment, the political environment currently in our communities. When the conversation turns to denigrating, belittling, or disqualifying a person for their volunteerism or terrible personal attacks on social media, we're instantly reminded that the vitriolic attacks that Republicans have waged on Democrats have trickled down to our community right here in Ridgefield, and that's not okay. Because when the people of Ridgefield see you coming after folks who are active in our community, whether through volunteer positions or by calling their neighbors to see if they're okay during a pandemic, and they see that you're going after the person who has been elected by your neighbors to represent you in Hartford, you're belittling their contributions, which are so meaningful. And that's because you're spending your time trying to take down those of us who are making an effort to do good, to lift others up. And this, especially on social media, is drawn clearly in a very partisan manner. And that's representative of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. So look, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on most of these issues. We all need to realize there's more on the ballot this year than just our names. Every box you check, you are protecting and strengthening rights, or you're dismantling them. And that goes for women, that goes for children in education, that goes for small businesses, It goes for the environment. It goes for the rights of every race, gender, and identity. It goes for healthcare, for your taxes. It goes to preventing gun violence, not only in schools, but in the communities next door to us. This goes for standing up to the utility companies and who are taking advantage of us. Arguably, more than ever, this election is a critical turning point for us all. And I'll just finish with, it's got to be Roe way all the way.
Finally, thank you. And finally, Mr. Hebert.
Thank you again. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and everybody that participated here tonight. My message is simple. We have had one party Democratic rule for 40 years and Hartford is broken. You know, we heard a lot today, even just now, about, you know, how we treat one another. Okay. What happens on social media, we don't have any control over, but what happens by our party, and when it was started that when every Republican, national and down to the local level, were accused of being malignantly cruel, grossly incompetent, and corrupt, that started a message that hit personally to every elected official throughout the town. So my message is that I bring the experience, the ability to work with people across all lines, and I'm committed to, you know, to solving the problems, the issues that we're dealing with, not just in Ridgefield, but in at the state level. As the former chairman of the Ridgefield Housing Authority and as a selectman, I've demonstrated a track record that people can go and look at. I have a documented track record of serving and supporting all Ridgefield residents, reaching across the political aisle, pardon me, to achieve, you know, the best outcomes for the town. When I do my work, I don't look at whether it's a Democrat or whether it's a Republican or anyone else. I serve all the people, and you can ask the citizens that received my letter for tax credits. On a very personal level, my values stem from a simple principle, like I said at the very beginning, of liberty, life, and dignity and respect for every person. And every person has the right to be treated with dignity and have the freedom to who they want to be. Thank you very much. And I ask for your support on November 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Hebert. Thank you to all of the candidates. Yes, Marilyn Carroll, I believe you wanted to say something in closing.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to thank you, Jean, for the excellent job you did moderating and trying to sort through all those questions. And thank you very much to all of the candidates. As we said, this was our first virtual forum and quite an experiment, and I thought it went out very, very well. And I also want to thank everyone who attended the forum. I know I don't have to remind anyone listening how important it is to vote this year and in every election, but want to assure you that whatever your voting plan is for this election, whether it be by absentee ballot or in person, your election officials in Ridgefield and Connecticut have the plans in place to make sure that every vote is counted. And if you have questions or concern about your voter registration, your absentee ballot, or your polling locations, please contact your registrars or voters and town clerks who are ready and willing to help you answer any questions or concerns you may have. And this information is also available on town websites, as well as the Secretary of State's website and the Ridgefield League of Women Voters and the League's US Vote 411 website. So you have ample opportunity to contact the candidates' campaigns, your local elected officials, women voters, and the Secretary of State. If you have questions, ask. There's an answer for everything. Thank you again for participating, everyone. And we'd like to say good night, good luck, and stay safe.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you. Leslie?